This is the sound where construction work begins. It is the sound of mining limestone, the raw material for the production of cement. Mannersdorf, home of the largest Austrian cement production plant, is one of the many places where limestone is mined and further manufactured.
Wir befinden uns hier in der Rohstoffhalle, ganz imposant, Speicherkapazität 40.000 Tonnen. Wie lange reicht das? Naja, da kommen wir gerade mal übers Wochenende.
Concrete is the main building material today, but can it last until tomorrow? The process of producing cement, which today is at around 4.5 billion tons per year, causes more CO2 emissions than any other industry. Though human progress has always been linked to building, the history of our civilization is the history of rising CO2 emissions. Does this mean we have to stop building? No. There are new approaches using alternative construction materials, for example wood, or alternative methods of building, such as hybrid construction. The goal is to provide sustainable housing in climate-friendly and energy-efficient buildings. A way to decrease CO2 emissions in cement production itself is to replace certain components of cement, such as crushed bricks from demolished buildings. But more needs to be done to reduce CO2 emissions. Another issue is the huge amount of energy needed in the combustion process. It takes 200 to 450 kilograms of coal to produce just 1 ton of cement. But there are ways to counteract the usage of fossil fuels. For instance, plastic waste. It is already being used to power the cement kiln in Mannersdorf almost 90% of the time. Globally, however, this rate is much lower. In the USA, for example, it is only 15%. Within the space of 30 years, Mannersdorf made a small but significant impact by halving CO2 emissions during cement production. There are many approaches to solutions, but this is still not enough.
Building bridges, building hope is the topic of this panel. We will discuss what can be done. And let me switch to German at this stage. For the audience here at the Hofburg in Vienna, you have headphones on your seats or behind your seats or under your seats. Please use them if you would like to listen in English. Ein herzliches Willkommen allen Diskussions.
A cordial welcome to all panelists here on stage. I would like to introduce you by name. On the right-hand side, Mr. Jan Jenisch, CEO of cement producer Holcim, and next to him, Luisa Neubauer, climate activist, Federal Minister Leonore G. Wessler to my left, responsible for climate protection, and Clemens Hallmann, the CEO of the Hallmann Holding. I would like to start with you. Madam Minister, you're responsible for climate protection, but you're also responsible for the environment, energy, mobility, innovation, and technology. So that's a huge portfolio, and the question of fossil fuels is, of course, interwoven with the war in Ukraine. How far has we come on June 14th, 2022, when it comes to phasing out fossil energy carriers? There is a number that we hear very often and that we'd like to talk about. So 78.2%. So this is the share of renewables in electricity production. So we are in first place in Europe. We have comprehensive legislation. Until 2030, we want to reach 100% renewables, but there is also a second figure, which is about 1 1/3, and this constitutes the share of renewables in our entire energy consumption. So still also in Austria, despite the steps that we are taking and all the efforts that we are making, we are depending on fossil fuels, fuels. So this is a very important topic in industry, in transport, and this is a topic with a view to the current global situation, which is very important, because if we see how much we feel what dependence on fossil fuels means to us. And also in terms of our dependency of someone like Mr. Putin, then this is a call to action. So we should use all our ambition and to redouble our ambition and to accelerate our ambition. I would like to say thank you to the European Commission, even if Franz Timmermans often agree that we have to act faster. It's incredibly important that the European Commission, in this situation in which we are, keeps on track, phasing out, so exiting this dependency of Russia on the pathway towards efficiency, renewables and climate protection. This is the pathway that we have embarked upon in Austria, so it's very important that the Commission and the Member States join forces, because still today there are so many who are not yet convinced that we have to convince, and this is why it is so important that also this message is emitted by this event. We did a lot. The act on the extension of renewables, acceleration of the energy transition, so that we have a fast track for renewables, especially in this period. We're working on a Green Gas Act. We're working on a legislative proposal stating that in the area of heating, in the area of building, we can phase out oil and gas systems until 2023, that we are going to do away with all the gas heating systems in Austria, because we have to do this very seriously and comprehensively, and there is a lot to do, of course. But we also provide a lot of support in the form of funds. The hydrogen strategy for industry is very important, and I think where we have to be quite honest, and this is also what Arnold Schwarzenegger has mentioned, is that the necessity for action and awareness has not arrived in all the heads and minds, and so we have a very important job to do, and we're going to talk about this job. The federal president also said it, so there are no appointments anymore in terms of consulting photovoltaic plants. Do we do enough? Do we do things fast enough? Because I think the willingness is there. Well, it's truly incredible. I have to emphasize this. We have a record budget for promotion for the funds for the exchange of oil and gas heating system. We have record budget for the support of photovoltaic plants. So we have received a record number of applications this year, so people in this country are ready to be part of this change, of this transition. There are many companies that have seen the writing on the wall, redoubling and accelerating their efforts, which is a good thing. We have to build on this, and we have to be active also in the future, because we see that the solutions that we need for climate protection, also the solutions that we need in order to get out of this incredible political crisis. Let's listen to industry. I would like to come to you, Mr. Jan Jenisch. You are CEO of Holcim, the world market leader in cement production. Today we are talking about best practice examples and what is going on also in the cement industry. Cement is a building material that we need, which is extremely CO2 intensive. Holcim has committed itself until 2050 as a cement producer to become climate neutral and to produce in a climate neutral fashion. But this was before the war in Ukraine. Do you have to change your plans?
Well, first of all, it's a great pleasure to be here in Vienna and in Austria. This is really one of the global pioneers, as we've heard from our minister, in terms of energy concepts, also in terms of sustainable building. So it is important to have zero energy buildings, and Vienna is a global pioneer in terms of that. And we from Holcim are pleased to be part of that endeavor. Together with politicians and construction companies, we are developing appropriate solutions. As to the question of Ukraine, I think this is going to accelerate sustainability. We have seen record prices for fossil fuels, and those are needed in order to ensure that industry can change and accelerate decarbonization. We are investing a lot in solar and wind for our power supply in our plants, and we also use alternative fuels, so we need high costs for fossil fuels in order to make sure that these investments pay off more quickly. Now, even though this conflict may be very negative in terms of the food shortages and energy supply, but of course it will accelerate our energy turnaround.
Doesn't change anything about your 2050 plan.
No, it will accelerate our plans. We have committed ourselves to decarbonize our products, and we also want to make a contribution for sustainable building, and that will be accelerated.
Sie haben das Stichwort Null-Energiehäuser geliefert.
Mentioned the buzzword of zero energy houses. I would like to turn to you, Clemens Hallmann, CEO of the Hallmann Holding. By the way, a long-standing supporter of the Austrian Summit. Thank you for that. You are a pioneer of sustainable construction, and later on we are going to talk about some of your projects. Now I would like to ask you about a problem that we have here in Vienna, which is existing building stock. How can existing building stock become greener?
Sie haben ein Mikrofon am Sessel, glaube ich auch.
You have a microphone on your table, Mr. Hallmann.
The sharing economy.
It's the sharing economy.
So the question was, it is very difficult to make existing building stock more efficient in terms of climate protection.
Yes, you're absolutely right. At first, I would like to tell you that we're very happy that this Plus Energiequartier, the positive energy neighborhood, is already being built, and the environmental award of 2021, well, we won first prize for innovation in cities. Last year we were the first developer in Austria that got a certificate based on the EU taxonomy for a property that we planned 4.5 years ago and that we handed over 2.5 years ago. The future is definitely going in the direction of neighborhoods that are supplied with renewable energy sources and thus can become more climate resilient. When it comes to the existing building stock, well, that was a very good question. Of course, we are struggling with several problems. Let me tell you that in many cities there are, of course, a lot more old buildings than new sustainable buildings. But of course, it is a major task to refurbish them. Often a lot of energy is lost just for the provision of energy. And we need to think in terms of renewables, which makes it possible to refurbish old buildings with renewables. But of course, well, these gas heating systems in Vienna, well, there's maybe 500,000 such gas heating systems which account for 90% of CO2 emissions in the building sector. And that is just incredible, and we need to quickly do something against that. And I really welcome the fact that laws are already being passed in order to contain this. Now let me return to the refurbishment of the existing building stock. We will also need public space in order to build geothermal energy or PV installations, because in Vienna it is very hard to drill for geothermal energy because we have canals and subways and we can't drill through them, and of course, and you can't really have PV systems on a beautiful stucco facade. So maybe by bringing together several buildings and have a decentralized energy supply for those buildings that can be combined with green district heating systems, so that we have well, autonomous or energy self-sufficient small blocks. Another major topic in downtown Vienna is to make sure that we reduce radiating heat and to stop sealing of surfaces.
Sealing of surfaces, do you mean roofs or facades? Do you mean the ground?
Where it is meadows that were covered with asphalt and thus generate a lot of heat in the summer because they reflect the heat from the sun.
It's back in the city.
Yes, we need to decarbonize the city.
Thank you very much, Luisa Neubauer. I can very well imagine that you hear many beautiful examples, but you're not quite happy being a climate activist in Germany. You are basically the face of Fridays for Future. You are a climate activist. Is development fast enough for you? Is development promising enough? Do you see enough hope on the horizon? First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. So it's not about the question whether it is fast enough for me as a climate activist, because we don't get up in the morning and say, well, my gut feeling tells me that it should be a bit faster today. So we are in a world which is 1.2 degrees warmer, where the basis of our livelihoods are worsening. And there are so many vulnerable people. It's not a question whether it's fast enough for us, but it's a question if we recognize this as our task to get the opportunity to join forces and to get out of the climate crisis. And I think, so the question is, do we do enough in order to comply with what is scientifically necessary? I do not want to crash the Green Happy Family Party. You think that we are making headway in terms of the crisis. The world looks quite differently according to current reports. Responding to the Ukraine crisis, the war, they show quite clearly that there is a backlash towards fossil energy. Investments are going up. The major industries and the dirtiest industries all over the world are expanding, and they are supported by governments all over the globe. Germany is one example. We are starting to install LNG terminals. It's also supported by the EU that has proposed an EU taxonomy in which natural gas shall be labeled as green. Today there is an important vote on this. So we want a climate disaster, but with a good conscience, and this is why we want to do it sustainably. Ms. Gewessler, you said that there is a readiness in the general population. This is right. After me, a politician is going to speak who will, and we know that in Lower Austria, no wind wheels will be activated. I can very well imagine that you will still comment on wind power. So it's not enough to sit on beautiful panels. Of course, we know about the arguments. Fossil energy is anti-democratic. They are weapons for war. We know this. But when we close our eyes and see where investments are going, where industries are becoming active, where banks are being financed, well, if we consider all this, then we can say goodbye to our 2050 goal. It's very important to take a close look and to recognize that the things that are not done in a climate neutral fashion, especially in cement production, they have to be toned down. So these years are very important. Time is running out. We don't have any time anymore for greenwashing, for feel-good answers, and for this very nice feeling that everything should be a little bit better, but that we can stick with business as usual. But don't we still need a little bit of optimism? Optimism in which regard? So the ones who have driven the climate crisis for 150 years suddenly mean better, that the promises are honest, and that human rights violations in 34 countries are just a pure coincidence, that we have invested a little bit, that this is a coincidence? No. So it's a strategy, an underlying strategy in terms of the basis of livelihood, and to exploit them in terms of profit. And it shouldn't be this way. We can change this, we can counteract this. For this we need optimism. Climate-just worlds are possible. Also cities, Vienna for example, by saying no to the Lobau tunnel, affordable housing, secure inner cities for everyone. The ideas are on the table, the solutions are on the table, but we have to act accordingly. Hope without action, this means betraying ourselves for those who are most vulnerable and who have not caused the climate crisis. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for your perspective. I think you have a comment to make on wind wheels in Austria. Wind wheels, yes, wind energy, wonderful, but no one wants to have it in their backyard. This is the problem in Austria a little bit. But at least you have some proposals to make. Yes, yesterday I presented a package because in view of the situation and the urgency, and Luisa Neubauer said it quite strongly, well, the position, wind wheels, yes, but not in my backyard. Well, this will not wash, and I cannot understand where it's okay. It's okay to invest in skiing infrastructure, but then windmills are going to destroy the landscape. And this is why yesterday we presented a legislative package on how renewables can be extended much faster, how we can ensure solidarity in terms of promoting wind energy. And in view of the situation we are in, as for the dependency on fossil energy, yes, there is a lot at stake, of course. We have to work in the right direction. This is important. And it is our task to ensure that the course towards energy efficiency and renewable energies will remain our beacon. And this is why I made this proposal yesterday. So what are the specific steps that Austria is planning when it comes to climate neutrality? Well, it all starts with the following. Political action starts with recognizing where we stand, and we have to take a look at the enormity of the task. Yes, in the area of power, we are well underway. We are allowed to say that. So the last 20% can be reached until 2030, and we are going to continue with further developing renewables. We are talking about renewable gas, hydrogen. We are focusing on this topic. We are working on a Green Gas Act and so on and so forth, a hydrogen strategy. But I think the most important thing here is that in our political work we see two things. First of all, the transformation that is pending. Well, here technology is going to help us, especially when it comes to the many industrial applications. But of course, we also need social transformation, institutional, political transformation, and it will be a transformation that will affect our lives, and thus it is why it is so important to deal with climate change on a very broad basis. There has been a climate council in Austria for 6 months with a representative body of 100 participants talking about all these topics, and this is why we work with employee representatives, employers representatives in the just transition process. We are talking about the qualifications, the impact on the labor market, and this is why we sit around a table with energy intensive industry. How fast do we have to act? What do we need? And this is why we are also dealing with all the topics revolving around infrastructure. This is a process which is very important for our societies, and it is going to put a huge strain on our societies. We need to recognize that a lot must change in our societies. Driving this change is the central task in climate protection, and I think in some political debates so there is a lack of awareness. So we cannot have the combustion engine anymore, and still at EU level, well, 2035 is too late in view of the magnitude of the task. So we need uniform rules, and there are many obstacles in the way, many constraints, and this is why we have to ensure the following. Now it is our task to invest in the future, and this is why we need boundary conditions, decisions, and we also need legal basis and also support, solidarity, a very strong feeling, very strong sense of responsibility. And we can only achieve this if we join forces and if people assembled here in this room are going to join forces, pull in concert, raise their voice, and verbalize and really say we want to make specific steps when it comes to investments, when it comes to political decisions, and when it comes to rules and regulations.
Ich möchte noch mal zu konkreten Beispielen.
I would like to once again talk about specific examples. Mr. Heilmann, hydrogen, you mentioned hydrogen. You are dealing also with hydrogen in construction, also with saltwater batteries, which is totally new for construction companies. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, sure. We have not been using any fossil fuels in our buildings for many years, and now I would like to venture the next step in the direction of hydrogen and saltwater batteries. With hydrogen, we want to produce electrical, we want to turn electricity into hydrogen and then store it in batteries in order to retrieve it whenever needed. That makes the building self-sufficient in energy. Hydrogen, of course, is a green and emission-free technology with unbeatable long-term storage potential. But of course, it also provides us with independence of our grid infrastructures, and it prevents blackouts that will be happening if we continue to consume as much energy as we do. The saltwater battery, the sodium-ion technology, is a very remarkable technology because it is based on natural resources, so it is consisting of water and salt, as the name says it. It doesn't burden the environment, it's not flammable, it's maintenance-free, and if you compare it with lithium-ion or lead batteries, that are problematic in terms of the environmental impact. Of course, a battery consisting of natural resources is a great thing, and our clear message is clean energy needs clean batteries too. And of course, we talked about a plus energy neighborhood. Of course, you can have an energy self-sufficient plus energy neighborhood if you combine it with such technologies. That serves not only to protect our environment, and that does not only maintain our natural resources, but that also reduces the strain, the financial strain on the occupants of the buildings. Because if they have energy security, because the building they live in produces the energy in a green and sustainable way, I believe that that is a good combination that we have made possible. But of course, all of us will be needed to achieve that, because only together we are strong, and only if we pull in the same direction. I'm talking about politicians, authorities, businesses, and every single one of us. Only if we're working to ensure this together can we bring about this energy transition the way it is planned. And this is why the Austrian World Summit serves as a signal. And I hope that we have sent out a good, positive signal with a lot of hope, based on the motto, learning from the past and creating the future.
And it's always good to hear voices such as Luisa Neubauer. Before coming back to you, I would like to come back to Jan Jenisch. So when you will be our next guest next year, what will Holcim have implemented until now?
Well, we have our roadmap. We will decarbonize, and next year we're going to focus more on recycling. We're already the second biggest recycling company in the world, where alternative raw materials are used in our production, but in particular also for new buildings. So currently, more than 1,000 truckloads worth of construction rubble is reprocessed as construction material. And next year, we would be very pleased to be able to discuss this in more detail. I think what gives me cause for optimism in this climate change debate, and over the past 2 years, so this has developed in an extreme fashion, from Fridays for Future, that has created awareness among the population and among politicians that people really want that. And I'm seeing this in our own company. We have 70,000 employees worldwide, and those are my climate activists in my own company. They want to be part of the solution, and when I do my staff appraisal interviews or the town hall meetings that are so modern nowadays, we are talking 80% about sustainability issues and how our company can be part of the solution. And that makes me extremely optimistic. And this has only developed over the past 3 years. To be honest, before that, it wasn't even on the agenda. We talked about cash flow and other things, and now 80% of the time is spent talking about sustainable solutions, and that gives me cause for optimism, because this is only the beginning, and from here on forward we need to really step on the gas, so to speak.
Luisa, you're a bit skeptical. So even if sustainability has grabbed headlines in industry and also in the world of business than it used to have, well, talking about Fridays for Future, how do you want to reach your goal? Which goal do you mean? So what is the goal of Fridays for Future? Well, it's the goal of all of us that we can get out of the climate crisis collectively as humans. It's also a question of human rights. It has to do with the Paris Climate Agreement. It's also important for companies. So I think that is so nice that the employees are also talking about sustainability, and the panelists are also talking about sustainability. But think about it. Climate justice, climate protection, what does it mean for groups, companies who are concentrating on reaching ever higher proceeds, but they are generated by destroying the climate. And this is the situation in the cement industry. So we should not bury our head in the sand. And there is a contradiction, an inherent contradiction. Do we want to earn ever more as a company by doing what we do? Or do we tone it down because we know that our product is so destructive for the environment, and it's so difficult to transform our product in a short period of time? And we have to ask ourselves, how can we make ourselves superfluous, so to speak? How can the construction sector be toned down wherever you can do it? We are also seeing a total construction craze, and we should ask ourselves the question, what does it mean to deal with cement and buildings in such a way as if it were a luxury item? So we should dismantle all the buildings, but recycle them, reuse them, and so on and so forth. So in theory, we can do that, I would claim, and the figures speak for themselves, that certain companies have made a decision. And this doesn't have to do anything with climate justice. You have worked up your way towards it, and we have to find interim solutions. We have to concentrate more on technologies. But in the midst of a climate emergency, as if we would say we are on a diet, 23.5 hours a day, and we are fasting for the remaining 30 minutes. It's a great idea, but it doesn't cut. If something is not sustainable, then it is not sustainable, and you cannot greenwash the situation in order to create the impression that there is some engagement for the Fridays for Future project. And this is the moment where politics must come in. So we need laws that enact regulations ensuring that companies generating many profits are pushed and nudged in a certain direction, in a direction that they do not want to be in. And this is why we sued our federal government in Germany and say we have a right to climate protection. You don't see it this way, and this is our right. So the possibilities are on the table. There's a right to climate protection. This does not only apply to Germany, but to all over the world. And it has to be applied. In Austria, it's very difficult, but because there is no Climate Protection Act after 500 days, so there is a lack of a legal basis. But I think that we will make headway, and you have to get started and think about how can we set the course, even if it's against the logic of profit and against many companies with a lot of power. If we are serious about climate justice, the world could be a much more peaceful, much more beautiful place, a world where we can look each other in the eye. So there would be no more exploitation. We wouldn't exploit people from the global south anymore. It could be that good, but we would have to depart from the illusion that a little bit of greenwashing will suffice. It's not that easy. And the nice thing is, as a climate activist, I can promise you, we can also refrain from this mindset, and then we can get started and really do something. Thank you very much, Luisa Neubauer. I would like to come back to you. Luisa Neubauer mentioned it. She mentioned the Climate Protection Act. We are still waiting for this act. Do you have any reason for optimism? Do you think that it will be possible to reach this goal, to enact such regulations anytime soon? I talked about the order of magnitude when it comes to change, and I think each legislative project that we had fought through over the last 2 years has met with a lot of resistance. And each legislative proposal, well, we have discussed it further. We fought for every millimeter yesterday. We are sending a huge act to the approval phase, which is very important for the use of gas in construction. And we are also going to fight for all the other laws and regulation as soon as they have the substance we need. And I think we also have to draw a lesson. So it's very important to reduce our dependency from Russian gas. I think this is the need of the hour, because the way out of this dependency, of this geopolitical blackmail, so this is the pathway towards climate protection. And I think also the Climate Protection Act is a very important part of this, and I fight for reaching this goal each and every day, so that during the next event of this kind I will be able to say, now this act will be approved soon.
Luisa Neubauer.
So I think you get a lot of applause here in this hall, but here your reminder meets a lot with a lot of approval. What can FARDIS for Future do in order to bring this idea closer to the general population? Are you talking about the idea of climate justice? So it's not the job of Fridays for Future to take responsibility for everything that the government has not done. This is not our hobby. There are so many things to be clarified at once. Well, I do not know. We have been doing this for quite a while. I don't know what it takes in order to refrain from this idea. Is it our job? Is it something to which all of us have committed ourselves? The Paris Climate Agreement has been adopted by a large majority by Austria. The political majorities are there. I don't know about Austria, but in Germany, a wide majority is for climate protection, for phasing out murderous, Putin-friendly fossil energies. So this is all on the table, and I think this idea that there might be some kind of resistance in society, well, I'm not so sure about that. And this is aloof from reality, but one thing is clear, and this is the debate that we have to lead. How can we make people go, wow, everywhere for the things, for the big changes? A lot is going to change in every direction through disasters, through our power, through our creativity, and we have to get started, and we have to bang the drum for this, and we have to inspire people for this, and we have to make it quite clear what we have to do. So there is not any option. So when it comes to climate protection, and this is where we stand, change will come anyway, and turning a blind eye is not an option. This is not a project that we are interested in. It doesn't work for industry, it doesn't work for society, and the problem is that meanwhile the question of the climate has been politicized. So when you think about bicycle lanes, for example, windmills, green energy, for example, so we have to become aware of the fact that people have to get an opportunity to see that for years or for decades they have been fed lies about environmental activists that want to take everything away from them. And we have to tell people how the situation really is, so that we have the opportunity to enact change and to shape change, and not to turn a blind eye, especially when it comes to people in the global south. And then I think we have seen it over the last 3.5 years, we've seen it today, and then people really feel like doing it. And it's very important to them that they are taken seriously when it comes to their right to clean air, and they do not, so their fuel discounts paid to the oil industry in Germany. So this is money that we would need for our transformation, and people don't want to do this anymore, and understandably enough. So the question is not only how can we make people go wow for climate justice, but how can we ensure that we see what we have to do. So one of the biggest changes that we have to do, or more and more disasters for which we are not prepared. And I think most people would opt for the first option. Don't you think that over the last years, many more people have realized that the climate is our big problem? In other words, Fridays for Future started 6 years ago. Are you a bit more optimistic than 6 years ago? For 3.5 years ago, actually, I started with Fridays for Future.
Well, interestingly enough, people were told for decades that the climate crisis doesn't even exist, except when you can fight against wind turbines. So I believe it is quite good to see that so many people have recognized the fact that there is climate change. But I think it's also liberating to no longer have to lie to yourself that more and more exploitation of our natural resources is a great concept for progress. So maybe it is cool to think about the fact that industries shouldn't have more rights than states or governments, and that the EU should not have more rights than a child that is entitled to clean air. So there's a lot of liberation containing the fact that we no longer need to tell ourselves fairy tales. Everything is going to turn out fine if we only firmly believe in it. No. I believe that people are now seeing how beautiful things could be if you liberate yourself from the idea that a car should be entitled to more rights in a city than people, and that people who are doing the most important jobs in our society are simply exploited because we can. And what is our relationship with respect to planet Earth? Are we coexisting with planet Earth? Are we at war with it? And that's the question we need to ask ourselves. Who are we as people? Can we be good, inherently good as people? And there are millions of people out there who are saying, yes, we can be good, and they want to, well, things to improve, not only for themselves, but also for other people in the world whom you don't even know and whom you're never going to know, because it's nice, because it's humane. And I think that's what we want to achieve by fair climate change, fair transitions. I think that's not so hard to understand, is it? Thank you, Lisa Neubauer.
Frau Minister Gewessler.
Minister Gewessler, let's come back to the subject, what gives us hope and calls for optimism. Well, we are facing a time of fundamental change. Change always causes concerns and fears because in some way it is uncharted territory. New industries that have to design completely new production processes. So this is really uncharted territory because a lot of things will need to change. But what we do need for this way forward is resolve. We need to be determined and courageous and bold, otherwise we're not going to be successful. And something that is often missing in the debate at the European or Austrian level is, well, and what gives me hope, rather, is that there are people at all levels who are actually doing it. And at all levels, there are people who are taking decisions and who want to get this change started. And there are more and more of those. And in terms of what Luisa Neubauer has told us, this not only what's going to happen if we fail to act, because not acting is not an option, but what is it worth fighting for, and why are we doing this, and how will we benefit as a society, as the economy, as people in Europe and on this planet, if we embark on this journey in a more ambitious way. So this narrative, well, let's not call it a story or narrative, that's not the right word, but we need to make it clear also in the political communication, and communicate clearly with everybody who is in a position of leadership. Why are we doing this? Why is it worth doing it? And then to show that it is possible, that we can do, that we can always decide differently, no matter whether we're in politics, business, or civil society. There are many people who are fighting for this day by day, and this gives us courage. Is that enough? No, of course not. But what's the alternative? To discontinue the fight? No, definitely not. So I think that we need to give a clear signal at this event that a lot of people across the globe are standing up for these ideals, and if we keep on doing it, there will be more and more of us, and I think it is well worth fighting for what we are fighting for at this summit. This has been a wonderful conclusion for this debate. Thank you very much to all participants, to all the companies who have seen which direction we're headed in. Thank you, Luisa Neubauer, for the words of admonition that we sometimes really need. And would also like to thank you for showing the way where we need to be headed. A transformation of industry is one of the major challenges. It's not easy by any means, but there are ways how to get there, and digitalization is one way to take us there, accompany us on this next journey in the direction of digitalization and climate.